Hello, I am Cthulhu, and today I am going to be showcasing a speedrun of Silksong Any No Major Glitches for AGDQ 2026 submission. I am very excited to do this run. Silksong is the very long-awaited sequel to Hollow Knight, a game very, very dear to my heart, and in my opinion, it delivered on basically every possible hope and dream I could have had for it. So I've been having a great time speedrunning this game, and I'd like to show you all how. I'm going to jump into the game, but while the beginning cutscenes load, I just want to mention that Silksong is actually the #1 game on speedrun.com in terms of active players. It surpasses every other speed game. It has the most active players with something like 700 active runners, over 500 submissions to the Any % category. So this game is absolutely massive, but it has also completely taken off in the speedrunning community, and there's been all sorts of wonderful strats and labbing and routing and optimizations that have already occurred, even though the game's only been out for just 2 months. So there's tons of cool tech across this run. The run is very difficult. The game, of course, is also very difficult. You may have heard some reviews of Silksong saying as much. But I'm going to show you that it can still be done quite quickly here. All right, the game starts and we get the Act 1 title screen, which of course was a surprise to many of us, and we begin by immediately showing off a piece of movement tech. We start with the Hunter's Crest, which, as many casual players know, means we have a diagonal pogo. Normally this can cause a bit of frustration in a casual playthrough, but for us it's actually a very key piece of movement tech. Doing a diagonal pogo is significantly faster than just walking. So for basically the entire early game until I pick up the Swift Step ability, I'm going to be doing all sorts of pogos all over the place. So keep your eye out for that. We have these slowdown segments in the intro area. This is Moss Grotto. It's a bit of a tutorial area. We don't really need to interact with much. But we do just have to sit through those segments. We can't do anything to really speed them up as far as we know now. Hopefully we'll find something in the future though. When I'm doing these diagonal pogos, I am actually doing a slightly harder version of the tech. So there's 2 kinds of pogos you can do. One where you jump high enough to fully cancel the pogo before you hit the ground. The other is where you let the pogo hit the ground, but you go neutral on your directional input when you hit the ground. Doing that cancels your end lag from the pogo, and it saves the most time. So I'm going to be doing that for basically the first 10 minutes of the run until we get dash. All right, we go through another one of these slowdown segments, and we head on up to the first boss of the game. Moss Mother is a pretty easy boss as far as the bosses in Silksong go. She's a good first tutorial boss, but I'm going to be going for a kill here where I try to trap her against the wall. She is misbehaving slightly, but that's okay. She doesn't have too much health, so she'll go down pretty quickly. Basically, every boss in this game has already gotten labbed out, or at least in the Any % run, has already gotten labbed out, and we've discovered lots and lots of very fast strats to kill basically everything. So I'm excited to show off some of those here today. All right, coming out of Moss Grotto, we get one last slowdown section, which signifies really the end of the tutorial. We see this threatening figure here over on the side. That's going to be the Chapel Maid, and we will be so nicely awoken by her very briefly here, as you can see, as we load in. She just smacks us with the stick. It's fantastic. During this dialogue, I just want to mention really quickly, I am running the game in Chinese. That is by far the fastest language to play this game in. It saves over a minute in Any % to English, and it saves a significant amount of time over literally every other language. So there's a lot of dialogue in this game. We are doing our best to reduce the amount that we have to mash through. But the Chapel Maid gives us our first real objective, and it is to enter the Citadel. That will be the end of Act 1 when we achieve that objective, so it feels like a good goal to work toward. But we actually have several different routes that we can take to achieve that goal. And that's one of the coolest things about this category. There have been many different routes for any percent since the game released only 2 months ago. And all of them are fairly viable within, basically a minute of each other. So the route I'm doing today is going to be a route that picks up the Drifter's Cloak and heads through the Last Judge. All right, so conveniently missing this so I can talk about it a little bit more, but we're doing an enemy pogo here. This is a Beastfly. They can be rather rude, but by pogoing that Beastfly, we can skip on up to this room, and that saves basically having to walk around the entire Marrows, so that's a multiple minute time save there. That is the first enemy pogo that we're seeing in this run, but it is far from the last. Enemy pogos are a huge piece of speedrun tech in this game, as they were in Hollow Knight, and it's going to be pretty important later in skips that range from saving just a couple of seconds to really entire minutes. We're heading right now toward our first major ability, which is the Silk Spear. That's going to be an important ability both for progression and also for damage. And there's the second pogo. That saves only a couple of seconds compared to the first one. But as you can see, enemy pogo is very, very useful. All right, so the Silk Spear gives us our first real damage ability. These are called Silk Skills. This is the only one we'll pick up in the run. All the others are optional. So the only one we'll have is Silk Spear for the entire run. It deals 3 times our needle damage, so it's quite useful, but it has a really long cast animation, so we will be rather particular about where we're using it. We're heading to the first real major boss of the run, which is the Bell Beast, and this is quite a step up in difficulty casually, and also from a speedrun perspective. So I'm going to be going for a phase skip here, and I need to be very careful about how much I damage the Bell Beast, because I want to manage her health so that I can very quickly get her to go into a phase transition and then kill her during the phase transition. So we'll see if we can get it here. Perfect. Okay, that was the phase skip. We got a perfect pattern there. We got all the damage we needed in that penultimate attack, and that skips basically half the fight. So that's quite a difficult skip, but we hit it nice and clean there. And we have a moment's respite here. This would be a good spot to take a quick donation break. All right, we have a little bit of a platforming section here. This is a dream sequence. We'll see Hornet go through a few of these throughout the run. Most of them are characterized by these little platforms that we have to hit with these little levers, and quite a bit of a misty camera feel to them. They are required platforming segments, and they usually just take a little bit of time. The ability we're picking up here is called a Silk Heart. It's not a particularly useful ability as far as major abilities in Metroidvanias go. This one will just regenerate 1 hit of our Silk, which is really the mana of this game, whenever we go to 0. So it will occasionally be useful, but for the most part, we can ignore its existence. All right, and with the Bell Beast down, we see a new friend. That is the last time we will be seeing our lovely friend Aira in this run. The Bell Beast is the fast travel system in this game, and she is absolutely adorable. But for the speed run, we actually don't need to use any fast travel at all. We simply zip on through the entire game. So with the bell beast down, we can make our way into the right side of the Marrows, and this is where things start to get more interesting. For example, there are lots of spikes that you can simply fall into there. We're heading toward the first real major ability of the game, which is called Swift Step. That's the dash ability, and it also allows us to sprint, and it will speed up the run considerably, and it is also very useful for just achieving progression. So luckily this is pretty early into the run, so we won't have to be doing this pogo movement forever. But as you'll see once we pick up the dash, there's plenty more movement tech to come. So a lot of these early areas are pretty straightforward. If you played this game casually, you may have some experience going into an area called Hunter's March. That is vaguely where we're heading, but we're only going to see a piece of it because we are skipping, well, not deliberately skipping, but just taking a different route through the early game here that will bring us to Swift Step without ever having to deal with some of the more difficult ant arenas and mini bosses of the early game Hunter's March. So luckily, things are quite nice for us. So we keep on heading over. We can just walk on that lava. It doesn't actually hurt us unless we stand there. So it's pretty easy to just head on through. Once again, there are small time saves with some enemy pogos, but nothing too major in any of these rooms. We're simply saving a couple of seconds here and there. And we get our first arena of the game. This arena, like many others, is going to be a careful management of enemy health. So we want to keep in mind that our nail deals 3 damage, or 5, oh my goodness, 5 damage, and our spear deals 15, so 3 times as much. Knowing exactly how many hits various enemies take allows us to map out some arena kills that make life a lot easier for us. It will be the first of many, many arenas to come. But after that arena, we do get access to our first major ability, major movement ability here, which is Swift Step. Now, once we have Swift Step, the core movement changes a lot. So instead of doing these pogos, we're going to be doing a cycle of sprinting, jumping, and pogoing. And what that does is it allows us to basically keep sprint jump momentum for as long as possible. The pogo cancels us out of the sprint jump, and by dashing again, we get back into that cycle. So we call these pogo dashes, and they are by far the fastest movement. I should mention these are only doable with the Hunter's Crest, which is the crest that we start with. So very helpfully, Team Cherry did begin us with that crest with the very helpful diagonal pogo. Everyone's favorite. All right, here we have our next major boss. This is Lace. And if Lace is nice to me, I'm going to be able to send her into the lava. Come over here. Come over here. Oh my goodness, she is not being nice to me. There we go. Sending her into the lava there does 40 damage compared to the 5 or 15 that a nail swing or a spear would do. So she was a little bit rude in getting to the edge of the platform, but we were able to show off that lovely lava dunk. All right, and we're going to continue on through here. The next area is Far Fields, and we have a little bit of traversal ahead of us. But where we're going is to pick up the Drifter's Cloak, and that's going to be our next major movement ability. It allows us to float in the air. Oh no! Slight fall in this room. The platforming can be a little bit unforgiving at times in this game, but luckily nothing is too long of a drop. But the Drifter's Cloak will allow us to float, and it will give us access to the next major area, which is going to be Greymoor. This is a required ability with an asterisk on the latest patch, which I'm running on. So I am using the latest patch route. I'm getting the Drifter's Cloak, and I'm going to be taking the Last Judge entrance into the Citadel, which is the most common casual route through the game. To pick up the cloak, we do need to do the Flexile Spines quest, which you can see me doing here. We need to pick up these spines from Hokers, and it can be a bit of a tricky and sometimes very RNG segment of the run. But as you can see, we've developed a lot of different strats to try to gather these as quickly as possible. And this was a pretty good cycle. We're pretty close to however many we need. We need 25, and I'm not entirely sure how many we've picked up so far, but we can tell when we're done because the text will turn gold in the corner. Like that. Perfect. Okay, so with that done, we can save and quit back to the bench where we picked up the quest. This is actually the only routing save and quit in the run, so sometimes in the other categories of this game, it is ideal to save and quit to menu in order to update your progress, but return to your last bench location. In any percent, it's not as necessary. Once again, we're following a fairly direct path from the start of the game all the way through to the final boss. But that is still the one routing save and quit we will do. You'll see a couple more save and quits for minor time save later. Alright, and coming up is a really big, terrifying boss known as Fourth Chorus. So I'm excited to show you all how we deal with Fourth Chorus here. Taking a small detour to pick up some silk, because you never know what can happen in a boss fight like this. Oh shit. We've dunked in lava. Alright. Turns out you can actually just completely leave the arena. So you can walk out of the fight, and Fourth Chorus doesn't do anything to stop you. There's a fast skip, which I missed there, known as the healless skip, which you get one try at. And the backup version, which uses a heal stall to achieve the same effect. The backup version is luckily quite consistent. Oops. This is fine. Perfect. These Carinids wanted my number. Alright, everyone say hi to Sherma. Sherma is one of my favorite characters in the game. The ideal route through here sees her for about 2 seconds. Other routes don't see Sherma at all. So this is clearly the optimal route for any percent. Alright, we are going to be heading up to Greymoor now. So by picking up the Drifter's Cloak, it opens up this path. As you can see, we're using that Drifter's Cloak to float up all of these various airstreams. This will bring us to the next major area, which is Greymoor. There are alternate paths to get to Greymoor, even casually, but this route is the fastest for the latest patch, as far as we know for now. Alright, coming up is probably the most difficult pogo skip in the run. We call it craw pogo, because the enemies that we're pogoing are known as craws. And they can be a little bit random. So I'm going to be doing my best. Perfect, we hit it first try. Okay, excellent. So that was craw pogo. We needed to time our pogos ideally so that we got the pogo on the second craw as it spawned. And I am going to take a couple of safety benches here, just for marathon safety. Alright, so now we can go through Greymoor, and Greymoor offers a slight step up in difficulty compared to some of the previous areas, but we'll be seeing even more increases later. So we're going to have another arena here. I'm going to talk about one thing that we are doing in this arena, which is known as a dash cancel. So what we can do in this game generally is when we attack with the needle, there's a cooldown before we can attack again. But if we dash immediately after hitting with the needle, we can actually get off another attack immediately. It's tricky to fit in a lot of places, but it definitely speeds up damage a lot when you're able to do it. So you'll see me using it throughout the run. And that's probably the first major usage of it there. Oops. Got bonked a little bit. Alright, so now we're heading down to everyone's favorite boss, which is Morwing. Morwing is honestly a pretty tricky fight. But we're going to try to get Morwing to head on over to the left wall here, and they are really not cooperating. Okay, there we go. So by getting Morwing to the wall here, we can make use of a new piece of tech called Spear Cancels. And the idea here is that by making the spear hit the wall, it actually ends the animation for the spear cast a little bit early. So it allows us to get a slightly higher DPS. Oh no. The double damage stagger strikes again. Okay, Morwing down. Not the cleanest of fights, but pretty reasonable overall. Alright, and Morwing can be definitely a big blocker casually, but in the speed run becomes a lot more consistent with that wall strat. Alright, and now we enter Haunted Bellheart, and if this isn't a disturbing scene, then I don't know what's wrong with you. I love all of this game, and entering Bellheart and seeing it, seeing all of its residents hung up by silk there is very, very intriguing to me. And I won't spoil anything directly, but if you haven't seen this casually, you might want to try doing a quick save and quit on that bench there. But now we're into Shellwood. I am going to be heading toward our next major movement ability, which is Cling Grip. That is going to give us the ability to wall jump, which is going to be necessary to finish the game. Oh my goodness, I'm getting slightly trolled by these stick bugs, but we're through. Cling Grip is very, very important. Being able to wall jump is a very, very key piece of most Metroidvanias, and this is no exception. There's a few skips on the way, though, so the next thing that we're going to be doing is called Sister Splinter Skip, or you may know of it as the Gadama Skip. We're going to be using Hornet's challenge button to actually lure an enemy into position in order to do a pogo and skip an entire boss. It's been known since basically the first week of the game being out, but it is a massive time save. So I'm going to show that off here. So we come to this spot and we use Hornet's challenge where she says "Gadama," and then we repeatedly wall slash. Oops, need to lure you slightly lower. There we go. Repeatedly wall slashing keeps the aggro. I'm not sure why they're misbehaving, but that's okay. We can always lure more with more Gadamas, which is Hornet's challenge. So this lures enemies and allows us to get them into position where we can actually skip here. So that is the Sister Splinter Skip. Now I'm going to be farming a little bit of silk for a skip here in this next room. Oh, I'm a little early here. That's okay. If you time that correctly, you can actually skip up to the ledge up there. It saves about 10 seconds. Nothing massive, but a nice little time save. Alright, and we're through. So we're going to go pick up the Cling Grip ability here. This will allow us to progress through the rest of the first act. right, and we have another moment here, a good spot for donations as we make our way to the next major boss. Yeah, the next thing that we're going to be doing is fighting Widow, who is probably one of my favorite bosses in the game, and that was true casually, and it is certainly still true now. Widow is a frantic fight with some of the best voice lines of any boss in the game, and I am quite excited here to show off some of the strats for Widow. I am going to take a bit of a safe heal here. Optimally, we would damage tank here, but because the pawn skaters were a little rude to me, we'll take a slightly slower cycle. Alright, but you can already hear the lovely Widow sounds. And this is beautiful. I love Widow. Widow encapsulates, you know, all of the correct feelings. And the fight is just incredibly frantic. It is very fast-paced. There's one more bit of combat tech that I start using. I've used a little bit up to this point, but we're using it most prominently here. And that is a dash strike. By using a dash strike into an enemy, similar to a dash cancel, you can actually attack again immediately. So by running up to Widow and doing a dash strike, we can attack a second time right away, which allows us to get a much higher DPS. Alright, you might think that's the end of the fight, but you would be very wrong. Widow has two phases like many of the bosses in this game, and she definitely holds nothing back in this second phase. So she's much more fast-paced. The music gets even more frantic. If you can't tell why I love this fight, then I think we're not watching the same fight. Alright, and that is Widow. Now, after Widow, we have another one of these dream platforming sequences. So this is another nice moment of respite. A good time for a couple of donations as well. And I will take the opportunity to have a sip of a Dr. Pepper. All right, so once again, we have several of these platforms to climb. We make use of our new Cling Grip ability and make use of our very brand new Needle-In ability. So Widow gives us this, and we won't actually be seeing all that much of it in any percent, but it is in fact necessary to beat the game on the latest patch. So the Needle-In is a very important pickup for us, and is the main reason that we have to fight Widow. Fighting Widow also gives us access to the Bellheart Bell. And the route that we're doing goes through the last judge to get to the Citadel. To do that, we need to ring 5 bells that are around the map. So far, we've already rung 3 of them, and we're about to ring our 4th here after the Widow fight. After this, we'll head to our final bell, and then we can go directly to the last judge and head into Act 2. But this is a nice, calm segment. We will take a moment to get a very important needle upgrade once we're done with all of these cutscenes and ringing the bell. The next segment is definitely one of the more complex segments in the Silksong Any % run. It is probably the single segment that is the most skip dense in the run. So we're going to actually be doing, well, attempting and hopefully hitting at least 4 different skips in the span of just 2 rooms in the Blasted Steppes, which will be our next major area. I do a quit out there. That actually saves time because there's a very long animation that plays when you ring any of the bells. On the previous bells, if you paid close attention, you'll notice that I was actually reloading the room. I would ring the bell, walk out of the room, and then walk back in. We can't leave the room on this bell because it is a locked room. We're locked in until we ring it. So we do save and quit there instead. Luckily, Widow is a hard save, so our respawn location is just right where we were. All right, and this is picking up the needle upgrade. On the latest patch, we can skip this cutscene. That is a little bit of time save over previous patches, which is quite a nice benefit. And we head back into Shellwood. So the last bell that we need to ring is in Shellwood. We do want to gather a little bit of silk along the way, and the reason is we need to have enough silk to do a heal for a particular skip in the Blasted Steppes. When you heal in this game, you actually carry your momentum a little bit with you. Okay, I need 5 hits in this next room. That's okay. We'll kill the 2 bell throwers. And we'll get 1 pogo on you. Perfect. Okay, good. So now we're at full silk, so we have enough to heal. Healing in this game is very rare. You need full silk to heal. But you heal for 3 hits of damage when you do. It's quite a departure from the previous game, Hollow Knight, where you would only need 1/3 of your soul meter to heal, but it would only heal for 1. And it makes for very interesting choices in combat. For example, if we're just 1 health short, but we have full silk, we need to make decisions about what we do. Alright, so I'm going to be doing the first skip here. As you can see, we carried our momentum with us through that heal, and that gave us a little extra distance, which allowed us to skip most of that room. That room is the first of many skips in Blasted Steppes. That first skip I tried was another one, but that one saved only a little bit of time. The one I just did was a second skip, and that one saved about 15 to 20 seconds. The third skip I just landed there was probably about 5 seconds. So very, very fast-paced room. 3 skips in about 10 seconds, but we made it through. The most important one was the middle one, which we did hit first try. And now we head on up to the next major boss, the Last Judge. Sounds like the kind of a final boss name, but rest assured this is far from the final boss. Last Judge is a pretty big milestone in a Silksong playthrough, though, because this is the final boss of Act 1. So she is a pretty difficult fight. She deals double damage, like many, many bosses in this game. And we need to be a little bit careful when we fight her. Luckily, her patterns are pretty readable. There's one attack that we really need to look out for. This spinning attack is part of it. But the real problem comes in with every boss's most dangerous attack, and that is called walking forward. If she walks into us after backing up, and we try to follow up with a dash strike for a quick double hit, we can get ourselves killed very quickly. You'll notice I'm using my spear here when we can't hit her otherwise. That allows us to keep up the DPS even when we are far away. Alright, and that was it for Last Judge. So, pretty difficult fight casually, but in the speedrun, it's very decent. And that is it for Act 1. So we head into Act 2 and into the Citadel. So our first main objective has been completed, and now we need to see what our objective is for Act 2. And at the very beginning, we don't really know. The Citadel is a bit of a mystery to us. All the pilgrims we've met so far have been trying to get to the Citadel, but none had quite succeeded yet. So we're about to see what really lies in here. And the first thing we're going to do is actually not head down the elevator into the underworks. So if you played this game casually, your experience at this point may have been to go to the right there and head into an elevator that looked like it would go up. That elevator, it turns out, would crash down into the underworks and send you on one of the more frustrating parts of a casual playthrough where every bench costs you money every time you use it. We don't do that. We just head up. It turns out that the breakable wall up here is breakable from both sides, so we can simply skip into the main part of the Citadel. That is a very intentional skip, and certainly findable on a casual playthrough, but it is a very important one for this route of the speedrun. Alright, and now we meet our longtime friend, Lace. Now, you might remember we fought Lace earlier. She is a bit of our nemesis in this game, and we will be seeing her again, so keep her in mind. She does just leave here. She doesn't fight us, but rest assured, we will get our refight. She instead says, come on up to the top of the Citadel, and we will meet up there. I'm going to take this bench just as a bit of marathon safety. Last Judge, oddly enough, is not a hard save. So were I to die to the upcoming segment, our bench would be all the way back in Shellwood, and we don't want that, so that bench is just a small detour. Go ahead and pick that up so that we have a little bit of insurance for this next section. Alright, and this is where the platforming in the game really takes a step up. So we're into Act 2 now, and the game starts pulling really no punches. You can see spikes everywhere, platforms that are all on cycles. Of course, in the speedrun, cycles don't mean as much because we just go up the spikes instead. But when you're playing the game casually, those cycles definitely matter. Alright, I'm going to use a bit of tech here that looks insane. I can actually basically pogo through those enemies by doing something called a pogo dash. Right as we connect the pogo on an enemy, if we dash right away, then we can keep a little bit of our momentum and use the iframes from the pogo in order to dash safely. And it allows us to pass through the enemy's entire line. Alright, and this is probably one of my favorite fights in the game. This is the Cogwork Dancers. This fight is very tricky. But you will see a couple of the things that we've talked about earlier, like wall cancels for the spear. They've teleported a little bit, but that's okay. And also dash strikes occasionally. This phase here is my favorite phase. They get slightly out of sync, and the fight just takes a huge step up. It's so good. These enemies do not share a health pool, so we really want to focus just one. There's no point in fighting both of them. So I started on the left, I keep on the left dancer as much as possible. And now we have the saddest phase of this fight, chat. This part here broke my heart when I played this game casually. We've killed one of the dancers, and now we fight the other one on their own. It's heartbreaking, and when you know the story behind the dancers, it's even more heartbreaking. But we won't get too much into the lore here in this speedrun. Once again, we do a save and quit here. This is not a routing save and quit, it just saves us the time of waiting for that death animation to play out. It saves kind of an insane amount of time for being such a non-consequential save and quit. Alright, but by interacting with those statues, we get the next major goal. So they give us the main task of Act 2, and they tell us that in order to access the top of the Citadel, what we need to do is simply collect 3 parts of the threefold melody. So that's what we're going to do. And the platforming through this whole segment is quite tricky. And everything just gets harder from here on out. So this game remains quite difficult. But we start to head immediately to our next melody. We do also need one more movement ability, which is called Claw Line. But luckily, that goal does dovetail with the melody quite well. So we're going to be heading into the Whispering Vaults to pick up Claw Line and eventually the Vault Keeper's melody. Once again, we're going to be doing this arena. Generally, the strategies in arenas, we can use our knowledge of how many hits various enemies take. But because these arenas can be rather long, it can be hard to have a full strategy for the entire arena. Mostly because you have to start dealing with different RNG depending on what the enemies do. But by just keeping in mind exactly how much health everything has, you can get rather consistent and get through the arena with no real issues. Alright, and with that we have access to the Whispering Vaults. So this is our next area, and there's quite a bit actually to do here. But first we're going to be heading to perhaps my favorite boss of the run, the one and only Throbio. So as we make our progress there, this would be another good moment for some donations. Alright, and I made sure to get up to full Silk on my way to Turbio, just so that I can take a heal at the start of the fight. Throbio is a fantastic character, but as a boss fight, things get a little bit chaotic. Turbio loves to throw balls that spew fire. There they are. There they are. And they deal 2 damage, like many, many things in this video game. So you're going to see a combination of some of the techniques that we've been using, namely some of these spear wall cancels and also these dash strikes for additional hits. But we have to be careful because it is very, very easy for things to get out of hand in this fight. So we'll go ahead and take a safety heal, just in case. Turbio can also go into the ground like this. It's very rude. There's nothing you can really do about it. Luckily, it only takes a couple of seconds. Alright, and there is Turbio down. Or as Turbio would say, Throbio! I love this character so much. I also want to just show off a fun little Easter egg here. So, Turbio is clearly dead, right? Turbio is just playing dead. Turbio will flop back onto the ground, peek back up when he thinks we're gone. It's such a good detail, and I absolutely adore the character. Alright, with Turbio down, we can head to the Underworks, and what we're going to be doing here is picking up our last major movement ability, and that is Claw Line. So I'm going to go ahead and take this safety bench. Once again, only takes a second to grab, which is very, very convenient. And then we're going to drop down here. Now, this area can be a little bit tricky. There are lava cycles that we need to worry about, so we have to be a little bit careful here not to run into the lava at any point. And ideally not run into the enemies either. So you can see me using that pogo dashing tech where we can dash through enemies with the pogo iframes. That ends up being very useful all throughout this run. And just like that, we've gotten down to Clawline. So this is our next major piece of movement, and it is the last piece of movement we need to pick up for any percent. This is hard required. The last two melodies that we're going to pick up do absolutely require Clawline because there are simply locked levers that use it. Also, I love the skip here. This room serves as a tutorial for Clawline, but really it works as a tutorial for speedrunning Clawline, where we can actually skip the entire thing by just going over to the left wall and then clawlining all the way across the room. That kind of tech is useful in a lot of places in longer categories. But we don't need it as much for any percent. But still quite a useful skip. Alright, and with one more arena down, we head into the other half of the underworks here. Now that we have Clawline, we are good to leave this area, but we do need to pick up one more thing on our way out. And that is the Vault Keeper's Melody, the first of 3. So that's what we're doing here. Once we have it, we are basically in go mode. We need to just go collect the other 2 pieces of the melody and continue on over to the final bosses. So this is another good spot for a couple of donations. All right, and we'll pick up this melody. This is a sacred cylinder, so it has the melody on it, but is not the melody itself. So we're gonna go and turn in that cylinder to the Vault Keeper, who will be able to play it for us, even if they don't exactly want to. Alright, and we did take a little bit of a safety bench there. This next section is probably the hardest platforming section of the run. So Upper Cogwork Core is where the Architect's Melody is, and as soon as we're done here with the Vault Keeper's Melody, that's where we'll be heading. That has some very, very difficult platforming, and I'm excited to show off some of the cycles in there. All right. So we have a little bit more movement before we get to the meat of the segment. So once again, a small amount of time here for a couple of donations. All right, and most of the movement through this section is retracing the steps that we took to get into the Whispering Vaults. But because of how the hard saves work in this game, there we go. Because of how hard saves work in this game, that is more or less necessary to get back over here. So Clawline acts as a hard save, and the Architect's Melody does as well. And you can see why we really want Clawline for this section. First of all, even getting in required that Clawline door. And you can see we use it perhaps a bit less than you might expect in the room itself. But like I said, this is... I need you to move over. There we go. This is one of the trickier platforming segments of the run. We skip most of the intended platforming here for significantly faster cycles using some of these pogos and claw lines on cogs. Alright, beautiful. And up here we have a puzzle, and very luckily for us, Team Cherry did not randomize this puzzle. No. Or its solution. So we are able to simply input the solution that we know and pick up the melody. So that's the hardest bit of platforming done. The segment after this is instead the hardest bit of combat in the run. So this run really does not let up. It is honestly so exciting. You get to go through excellent bosses, excellent platforming, and then one of the most difficult combat sections right into the final bosses. So I'm excited to show you all that as well. So this is Melody 2 of 3. The next place we're heading is High Halls, and we'll have a little bit more tricky platforming on our way, including leaving this arena, which can be very tricky. I'm going to take another safety bench here, which takes a little bit of time to grab, but not too much. And this will provide some insurance for us in High Halls. But yes, our next section is going through High Halls over to the Conductor's Melody Arena, and that is a grueling 11-wave gauntlet. That has a respawn, might be good. Yes, good. Beautiful. It's a grueling 11-wave gauntlet that can be the death of a lot of casual attempts at the speedrunning achievement. So it's definitely the hardest bit of combat for us, but standing between us and that is the actual platforming of the High Halls, which is very clawline heavy. So once again, you can see why we went and grabbed clawline before we were able to do any of these segments. So there's a lot of little precise tricks and skips to get through this section, but we'll do some of them. But especially in the final drop, there is a very tricky cycle here, which you can achieve even without the Drifter's Cloak. So I do have the Drifter's Cloak here, but it is a little bit slower to use it. So I'm going to try to hit this cycle. Beautiful. And just for safety, we did a little bit of the float on the way down. All right, excellent. And we are through. I'm going to go ahead and grab this bench as well. And now we can head into the arena. So the High Halls Arena is probably the single hardest thing in the run. Platforming or combat, both are hard in High Halls, but this is truly the crown jewel of difficult combat in this game. So we have only 5 masks, of course. We didn't get any health upgrades. We got 1 damage upgrade. And we have no tools. So we have to be very careful. A lot of the enemies in here do deal 2 damage. So you need to be extremely careful. Oh, just like that. You need to be extremely careful about the damage that you do take. Now, I'm going to be doing a lot of dash cancels throughout the arena. Once again, that is where we dash immediately after attacking with the nail, and that allows us to attack again immediately. It's extremely useful for this kind of combat. Alright, this marks the halfway point of the arena. These enemies are quite dangerous. I want to be deliberate about making sure I end that with a lot of silk, though, because we want to be able to fight all of these flying enemies much more quickly. And flying enemies especially, they do not behave well when you need to hit them with your needle. These bell throwers here are probably the absolute bane of a typical casual experience, and they are also the bane of my typical speedrunning experience, so nothing has changed. Okay, one last wave. This is the double clapper wave, and it is by far the hardest wave of the arena. Anybody that has tried to do a speedrun of this game will tell you all about how they died with just one hit left to these enemies. They are notorious for killing casual and speedruns alike. Alright, but we did get through it with not a scratch in the end. So that is the High Halls Arena. Again, extremely difficult, but once you have the speedrunning knowledge and practice, it becomes a lot more doable. And this is our final melody piece as well. So this is Melody 3 of 3. And during this, we have another brief break for donations. All right, now we can head back to the center of the Citadel and finally access the very top. And we are going to find the final bosses. One more trip through these Grand Reeds, and I really do mean through them. And we can play our threefold melody for these lovely statues. And once again, this is another slow moment. We can take a few donations. We have the final bosses coming up, so this is one of the last good moments. All right. So the boss that's up next is going to be our good old-fashioned nemesis, Lace. She gets quite an upgrade for this second fight, and we have to be very careful. So Lace deals double damage on most of her attacks. Once again, we only have 5 health, so we have to be very careful not to do anything too terrible. The fight itself can go pretty quickly if we are keeping up with our needle slashes. You can get damage in on almost every attack of Lace's. So we're going to do our best to keep that damage up and get this fight over as soon as possible. This arena is also just one of the absolute prettiest arenas. And as soon as we skip this cutscene, we will be just right into the fight. So Lace has 2 main attacks, this triple slash and that jump attack. She also has a dash attack that she will use occasionally, especially in the second phase of the fight, which we just entered. And also in the second phase, her jump attack gets those additional circles. Those also deal 2 damage if we get hit by them. When in doubt, in Silksong, assume that it does 2 damage. Alright, and this is the 3rd phase, and I don't know if anyone can guess how much damage... Oh, I really didn't mean to poke it out. How much damage that attack does. You'd be surprised, but it's actually 2. All right, and that's the lace fight done. 1 hit due to a bad pogo, but otherwise quite nice. All right, and we have one final bit of respite here, where we're going to do one last dream sequence to pick up a second silk heart, which will prove to be almost entirely useless to us, before we fight the final boss. So one last bit of calm platforming, and really final call to donations before the final boss. All right, so we head up here. We have more of this platform manipulation. We'll see more of that on the way to the final boss as well. But, I want to talk a little bit about the danger of the final boss. So Grandmother Silk is the next fight that we're going to be facing. And she is extremely difficult. Not necessarily because she's hard to dodge attacks for, but because she hits for 3 damage instead of 2 on one of her attacks. What that means is we will simply die if we get hit by a 3 damage attack and then a 2 damage attack, or the reverse. So we need to be extremely careful during this final fight to not take that death. And we will be very careful. So we head on up. We have this final bit of platforming, and we are ready for the fight. So on this fight, we're going to want to be using a lot of dash cancels, which I've been talking about, but again, we're going to slash, then dash, and slash again, because it resets our needle cooldown. That's going to allow us to get in way more attacks and deal damage much faster. We're also going to mix in Silk Spears when we can, which is especially good during these sword attacks. One thing that we can also do is try to use our harpoon to actually keep up with Grandmother Silk when she is moving far away. She is definitely being rude to me, but that's okay. That attack right there, the Silk attack, that's the one that does 3 damage. If we're not careful, we take 3 damage from that attack. So I'm going to do my best to keep my health above 3 for the entire fight. Okay, first phase down. Not too bad. But of course, the fight is not done just yet. Never assume that a boss is dead in Silksong until you have left the arena. Alright, weird pattern here. The second phase largely is the same as the first, except it adds in a couple of wrinkles. Oh my goodness, that was sketchy, but it's okay. Those wrinkles are mostly the falling rocks and and the additional platform, or not platforms, the additional spikes that appear. Okay, that was a little close, but we had enough time. All right, and that is Grandmother Silk down. Okay, and that is officially the final boss. Time will be when the cutscene starts, which is in just a couple of seconds. So get ready. And time. All right, that is Silksong Any %. This is only one of the multiple endings that you can get in this game, and there are a lot more little secrets and a lot more content to be seen in Silksong, but this gives an excellent overview of a lot of the speed tech, a lot of the most interesting fights, and of course, rolls the credits as quickly as possible. I'm so glad I was able to showcase this for you today. I hope that you enjoyed, and I hope you're all enjoying Silksong as much as I have. As someone who played over 4,000 hours of Hollow Knight, this has been really like Christmas for 4 months for me. But that is credits. Now, we do have quite a long credit sequence, but we will see our in-game time at the end. This is a good time for one last throw to donations, and of course we can cut here as well.